Oklahoma County Democratic Party. How many of you guys are excited to see Beto work tonight? First, I'm going to start off with some introductions. I'm proud to announce we have our Senate Minority Leader, Julia Kurt, in attendance with us. Also, right next to her, I have Senator Carrie Hicks. And also, let's not forget about our new elected official, Representative Ellen Portmiller. And also, from House District 87, Ellen Hefner. ¿Quiere escuchar mis latinos? Because we also elected our first Guatemalan elected official here in the state of Oklahoma. Guatemalan American School Board, Jessica Cifuentes. Y estoy bien orgulloso de introducir a la primera alcaldesa, our first Latina mayor in this state, Amanda Sandoval. Can you hear me? I'm also honored to introduce our candidate, the one who's going to flip the fifth, Gina Nelson! Folks, is there any other candidates that I missed that could just stand up? Any other candidates?
John Croissant from CD1.
CD1? Right there? I'm also honored to have our amazing governor, Governor David Walters! Let's not. There was a time when Oklahoma was blue. And we can get to that again. I also want to present the pride, an Attorney General, Drew Edmondson! There was a time when Oklahoma and Texas had Democrats. Folks, we rank last in voting now, Oklahoma and Texas. I know everybody here is here for a reason. You're politically engaged. But I also want to let you know to get your friends and family members involved, to let them know, hey, get out and vote. Hey, this is the reason we need to get to vote. If we get those ranks higher, I guarantee you we won't have no more Ryan Walters or none of this and that. No se olviden también de su comunidad latina porque también estamos aquí as well in Texas. We need to get that turnout, and when we get that turnout, we will have our blue wave. I also want to introduce our new elected officials from the Oklahoma Democratic Party, Chair John Waldron and Vice Chair Aaron Brewer. And I see him right in front of me, our new treasurer as well, Alberto Alonso! I really appreciate every single one of you coming. Right now I want to introduce an amazing chair, the chair of Oklahoma County Democratic Party, an indigenous woman, a woman who fights for change, and a woman who's been fighting. Even if we take defeats, we got to stand back up and we got to keep fighting because we're not doing it for us, we're doing it for Oklahoma. I want to introduce the amazing chair, Amy Ward!
gosh. Yes. Good evening, Oklahoma City. Let's go. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you to the elected officials, candidates, my fellow Oklahoma County Democratic Party officers, Beto O'Rourke and his team, the vendors and volunteers, and most importantly, you, for coming together in this urgent and hopeful moment. Tonight is about more than politics. It's about power and making sure it belongs with the people. And right now, yes, and right now that power is under attack. Across the country, and specifically here in Oklahoma, we are facing an unprecedented test. You've heard of Project 2025, an extremist blueprint designed to dismantle civil rights, erase reproductive freedoms, criminalize our 2S LGBTQ identities, suppress indigenous sovereignty, and roll back all of these gains that we have made over time. What's frightening is it's not just the cruelty of this vision, but how organized, strategic, and deliberate it is. And while they say they want to treat us, Oklahoma, Texas, and other states as testing grounds, let me be absolutely clear. Oklahoma is not a lost cause. Oklahoma is the front line. Yeah. We know this fight. We have lived it. We have come together, built communities, grown together, and shown that we can do this without media. We can elect officials without national funding, and we can come together as one to show them that we are Oklahoma County and we fight back. We have to understand we're not alone in this fight, that many states, including our neighbors across the Red River, are fighting right now gerrymandering of their congressional seats to try and steal democracy. Boo! Yeah, we're not going to do that, are we? Yeah, no. So right now, what we need out of these injustices are leaders that are emerging, leaders like Beto O'Rourke. Someone who has taken on the toughest fights, someone who has walked alongside our communities in times of crisis and lifted up our voices in rooms of power, someone who believes, like we do, that no one is expendable and everyone has a role in this moment. We know that we want to build a future that includes all of us. We must do it together. We need each other across state lines, across movements, across generations. That's why leaders like Beto matter, because he reminds us that the fight isn't just in DC. It's in Denton, in Duncan, in Del City. It's in Shawnee. It's at the doors. It's at town halls, just like this. It's at the school board meetings. It's in every place that you show up to fight for your freedoms. I want to mention real quickly, we have vendors along the back row. We have Rock the Native Vote. We have Foundation for Liberating Minds, LULAC Oklahoma City, Let's Fix This, and the House and Senate Dems. And right now, please join me in welcoming to the stage a true champion for democracy, for justice, and our freedom, Beto O'Rourke.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership. Hey, everybody. Thank you. Can we hear it for Jose and our chairwoman, who is on the front line of this fight day in and day out? Amy, Jose, thank you for the work that you're doing. Con orgullo. So I take it by your attendance tonight that you all did not get the memo. Oklahoma is not supposed to count. Your participation in our politics is not supposed to matter. It's not going to make a difference. This stuff has all been decided. No lesser authority than the Democratic National Committee, which poured more than $1 billion into 7 states, none of which were named Oklahoma in the 2024 election, trying to stop the greatest threat and attack on democracy that we have ever seen, at least since the United States Civil War. And not only did we not do anything in the other 43 states in this country, but we lost each and every single one of the 7 so-called battleground states. We failed to read that memo in Texas as well. And as you know, earlier this week on Sunday, 56 Democratic state legislators left the state of Texas That's right. To deny their Republican counterparts the quorum, the numbers necessary to redraw 5 congressional districts currently represented by Democrats in the state of Texas at the behest of the President of the United States, who made no pretense about the constitutional necessity of this or about the representation of the voters in said districts. He literally ordered, in the light of day, in front of the cameras, on live microphones, find me 5 more seats in Texas. And these brave Democrats in Texas, who also failed to read this memo, said, over my dead body, are you going to steal these 5 seats in Texas? And at extraordinary risk to themselves, the governor has already sent out the Department of Public Safety state troopers to try to arrest them. The Attorney General, Ken Paxton, maybe you've heard of this guy. He has vowed, this is the language that he used. He said that he is going to hunt them down. And someone perhaps inspired by that language threatened to blow up those 56 state legislators in Chicago today. They had to evacuate their hotel because of a credible bomb threat coming in right there. Then in addition, y además, they're being fined $500 a day to a person every single day that they stay away from the state of Texas. The governor has just filed with the Texas Supreme Court to vacate the seats, to take the seats of those state legislators and replace them with his cronies and quislings and corrupt Republicans who will continue to do his bidding and the bidding of the president. Those folks now face the prospect of federal law enforcement. I don't know if it's going to be the FBI, or Department of Homeland Security, or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, because they're getting really good at rounding up our fellow Americans right now. I don't know what they're going to face, but they're up against it all. And I just want to make sure that we are all clear on who they're doing this for. They're not doing it for the Democratic Party. They're not doing it for the people of Texas alone. They're doing it for each and every single American, Democrat, Republican, independent, native-born, immigrant alike. All of us. Todos unidos. And right now, they need your help. If you want to support them, if you've been figuring out, trying to find a way to get into this fight, here's what we can do. If you text the word fight to 20377, fight to 20377, We're going to send you back a link. You click on that link, and you can donate 100 cents on the dollar will go to those Texas Democrats for as long as it takes to stop this steal of 5 congressional seats in the state of Texas. So, I want you, before we leave here today, it doesn't matter if it's $2 or $20 or $200. It's the money that's important because it's the food, it's the flights, it's the lodging costs that we have to worry about. But it's also just the moral support. When they see that these donations are coming in from folks in Oklahoma City tonight, as they saw them come in from folks in Kansas City 2 nights ago, Omaha, Nebraska, last night, we have somebody from Omaha, but just one, wherever you are. You know what? That's going to strengthen them at this moment, that we are depending, all of us, on their courage. And just to make it interesting, because we have been raising money for these Texas Democrats, that same Attorney General Ken Paxton, who spoke, this is ironic, it's perverse, he spoke at the Stop the Steal rally on the 6th of January 2021 in Washington, D.C., as they stoked and incited an insurrection that invaded the citadel of our very democracy, the first time it has happened in American history since the War of 1812. It's the same one where they constructed a gallows, where they proposed to hang the Vice President of the United States for not bending the knee to Donald Trump and defying the Constitution. And sorry, my microphone's going out. So this is the guy that we're talking about, who was twice indicted on securities fraud charges. And ladies and gentlemen, he was impeached by the Texas legislature, which is a Republican majority institution, on charges of bribery himself. And he's accusing us of some kind of fraud as we try to stop the theft of these 5 congressional seats. Well, you know what? We welcome his investigation. We welcome his attack. We welcome their hatred right now because it proves that we're doing the right thing. Now, some of you are saying, Beto, isn't this a little bit early to be talking about elections in 2026? I mean, we're still in the summer of 2025. I want you to pay attention to this history. We all know that it doesn't repeat, but very often it rhymes. From the moment that he was named chancellor in January of 1933, it took Hitler 53 days to destroy German democracy. In those 53 days, at every major turn, every time he defied the German Constitution, every time he exceeded his authority, every time he tried to break the rule of law in that country, the German press, the German politicians, and most importantly, the German public did far too little, too late. In 53 days, this guy goes from being a buffoonish thug who can barely hold power to the undisputed master and dictator of the German people. Now, you and I would like to think if we were alive back in 1932, 1933, we would have done something. We would have stepped up. We would have resisted. We would have fought back. We would have prevented this abuse of power and the destruction of one of the great democracies and republics on the continent. Well, here's our chance. In the 6 months since Donald Trump has been sworn in, he has defied the co-equal judicial branch of government, ignoring federal court order after federal court order. He has dismantled congressionally mandated and chartered agencies and departments like USAID and the Department of Education. He has colluded with corrupt public officials, and he has dispensed with nearly every single constitutional protection and safeguard that up until now has kept us a nation of laws and not a nation of kings. And now, in front of our eyes, he seeks to grab more power. And I'll tell you why. He understands that his policies, whether it's kicking millions of people off of Medicaid, whether it's transferring hundreds of billions of dollars of our wealth that we made and produced to the richest 1% in this country, or terrorizing hard-working Americans doing back-breaking work with these Gestapo tactics and roundups that we're seeing across the country. This stuff is not popular in America. And without the theft of these 5 congressional seats, he has no hope of holding on to power in the House of Representatives. And if he loses that power, there will be a check on his lawlessness. There will be accountability. There will be accountability for his crimes and his corruption as far as they go with whomever he may have been associated. You know right now, none of us were invited, and that's why we're here, but J.D. Vance at the Vice Presidential Observatory Mansion is hosting a meeting with the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI, and not a single one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, to determine how they are going to hide the truth and deny those victims, those girls who were raped and trafficked, the justice that they deserve in this country. He knows that if he loses the House of Representatives, there will be a reckoning. There will be an accounting. And he also knows that should he lose his grip on power, there will be free and fair elections going forward in this country. And remember, this is the guy who promised you before he won the election in 2024 that he would be a dictator on day one, that November 2024 election would be the last one that you would ever have to vote in. So let's pay attention to him and believe him when he tells us what he plans to do. What we are doing here tonight, it is not just supporting those Democrats in Texas, as important as that is, and I want you to do that, to save these 5 seats. It is also important that we do the work right now to win the congressional seat that we're in today in Oklahoma City. It is a seat that we can win and that we should win. And given how close the balance of power is in the House of Representatives right now, they have a 3-seat majority, the MAGA Republicans do right now, winning this seat in this district. And I understand that Gina Nelson, when she ran for superintendent statewide, she won this district with 51% of the vote. We can win it again in 2026. We got to get behind her now. But, and this is important, and I want you to think about it, especially the older folks in the room. I'm going to be 53 years old in September, okay? Young to some of you old geezers, old to some of you terribly young folks, right? I'm right in the middle, or I'm just too old, or I'm just too young, who knows? But if you're like me, I've got 3 kids, an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 14-year-old. And those 3 are my conscience. And I fear the questions that they are bound to ask me sooner or later. Hey, Dad, when all this was going on in 2025, clear as day what was happening to this country, what did you do? You're going to have to answer that question yourself, no matter how old you are. At some point down the road, the generations that follow ours will want to know. Because if we fail to stop this steal in Texas, if we fail to win political power in the House, I believe the concentration of authoritarian power in the hands of the president will be nearly unstoppable after 2026. What that means is more masked, plainclothes federal agents without warrants or badges sweeping our friends and families and community members off the streets, illegally detaining them, illegally imprisoning them, illegally deporting them to countries they have never been to before, whose languages they do not speak, including into that gulag in El Salvador, out from which you are bound never to come. It means that more of Trump's political opponents will be targeted for retribution, for persecution, and yes, let's pay attention, even for violence. And it means it is far more likely that a complicit, corrupt, Republican-controlled Congress will roll out the royal red carpet for a third Trump term. That is our future unless we avert it. And in a government of, by, and for the people, and I still believe in those words, the power is in this room with all of us, but we've got to use it. And so we are so conditioned, especially after the first Trump term, to think about fighting back. And I get that, but I've been trying to think about what we could do better than fight back, because fighting back really hasn't worked for us. Reacting, responding, resisting. There was a resistance in Germany. There was a resistance in Poland. There was a resistance in France. There was a resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto. And they were noble and courageous, but that resistance was far too late to avert the catastrophe that befell so much of the world. So I ask you to think about not fighting back, but taking the fight directly to them, like a boxer getting off of the back foot, off of the ropes, onto the front foot, going from defense to offense, taking this fight to them everywhere in America, every state, every county in every state. The broadest united front possible, and no longer awaiting the punch thrown by these would-be fascists, but throwing our punch first and throwing it harder. How about that, folks? I think that's the way we got to meet this. How about this one? So what does that look like? We've talked about a few ideas so far. We've got to keep these Texas Democrats out there on the road. The longer they stay away, the more likely it is we will not have time to adopt new congressional maps in the state of Texas. Second thing, we have got to work like hell to win this district right now. I told you how slim the majority is in the House right now. I mean, this sucker could be decided by one congressional district. And as Amy said, it's going to come from the last place that they expected to. No one is going to be watching Oklahoma except for the people of Oklahoma. But after you win this, the world is going to take notice. And I want us to take another step. What if we encourage those Democratic governors who are in places like New York, New Jersey, Illinois, California? What if they seized the initiative and did not wait for Texas and redrew their congressional maps to the advantage of Democrats? I don't know how you feel, but I am so sick of the Democrats playing by the rules, coloring within the lines, being nice. We have to beat these bastards, and we're not going to do it by playing nice. We got to be tough. We got to be focused on power. We got to stop waiting for the refs to intervene in the game. The refs have left the arena. This is an all-out brawl, and you are in it. For as long as we still consider ourselves a democracy, the world is counting on you. And in Texas and the places that I just mentioned that I've been prior to coming to Oklahoma, we cannot concede the fight there either. When we were running this race for Senate in 2018 against Ted Cruz, we went to each one of the 254 counties of Texas. We went to the big blue places because we were going to make sure that we did not take your vote for granted. We knew that we had to earn it. You know, dirty secret about the Democratic Party: if you're black, if you're brown, we think we've already got your vote in the bank, so we don't show up and listen to you, work with you, and fight right alongside you. We did not make that mistake in 2018. The other thing that the Democratic Party, present company excluded, failed to do, at least in my home state of Texas, was to visit or spend any time or resources in any of those more remote, rural, so-called red counties. And listen, you know what I'm talking about in Oklahoma. You can see our red counties from outer space just glowing, as you orbit the planet. You know where Oklahoma and Texas are, right? But when I show up in these places, it is astounding how much we have in common. They've literally been waiting for someone to show up and fight for them. I meet school teachers who work at the local high school. It is the largest employer in these rural counties. And our governor is draining our public tax dollars from these local schools to convert them into vouchers and send them to the rich kids in the big cities going to private schools right now. In rural Texas, they're pissed off about this. They don't like that their rural hospitals are closing down with these cuts to Medicaid. They believe in unions, and you know what? Believe it or not, they want immigration coming into this country because they understand it is the bedrock of the strength, the security, the success of their communities. But if Democrats don't show up, what do we expect? So to tell you what's possible, in that race, though we came up a little short against Ted Cruz, we produced the largest voter turnout in Texas history. Young voters showed up at a rate of 500% greater.
Switch to channel 2. Hello? You have to switch to channel 2. Could you do that?
We also have to offer our families, our friends, our fellow Americans, something that we can fight for. I think in these presidential elections has been all about what we're trying to stop, the evil of Donald Trump, and I get it, but we have to offer our fellow Americans enough of what they can vote for. So I want to share this with you. Instead of Democrats saying that they want to save democracy, because that's really confusing for people. U.S. in Texas, where it's harder to vote, it's harder to register to vote than in any other state, where they watch one man named Elon Musk get $300 million supporting his preferred candidate for the presidency. They say, what democracy are you talking about? So instead of all that, how about we build a democracy in this country that is worth saving? Corporations will no longer be people. money would no longer be spent, and corporations could no longer spend unlimited amounts of money purchasing the outcomes of elections. If we actually used our power to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Adjustment Act, then you could vote in the state of Texas. You could vote in Oklahoma. You could vote in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, and the states of the Deep South. If we got big money out of politics, we would force candidates to campaign on the ground, to do what we're doing right now, to engage in conversation, to say, you know what? No me importa whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. I showed up to your community and your county to listen to you, to work through our differences, to find some common ground, and to work together going forward. And what if we did this? What if we set term limits on every single office, no matter the level of government, so that we had more turnover, more young people coming up, our chambers of power looking more like the people that they purport to represent. And after we win power, how about this one? No more politicians choosing their voters. It should be around. We end political redistricting. We give it back to the people. All the power back to the people. But one of the lessons I think we've learned in this country over the last 20 years is that we will have faint hope of establishing and maintaining a political democracy if we don't also have an economic one. Because what we've witnessed is if our fellow Americans who are not asking for much cannot get what they need from a government of the many, soon enough they're open to getting what they need from a government of the few, or a government even of only one. Here's what I hear when I hold town hall meetings like these all over the country. We want to guarantee that if you work one job, that is enough to be able to take care of yourself and your family and survive without a second or a third job to make ends meet. I hear people saying, can you just guarantee me that I can see a doctor when I'm sick? I can see a doctor before I get sick. I can take my kid to a behavioral health specialist so she's ready to learn in school over the course of the day. I want universal health care, Medicare for all, Medicaid expanded, whatever we need to do to get everyone covered, healthy and well enough just to live to their full potential. I just want you to be healthy enough to be able to go to work or finish your education or start a punk rock band or raise your kids or do whatever you were placed on this planet to perform in the first place. Not asking too much, right? Or how about this? So many of our fellow Americans who are a little bit younger than I am say, I watched my grandparents and my parents be able to afford a home. I've been working out for 6, 8, 10 years, and I still cannot get out of this apartment and renting. I want to be able to buy a home. Let's say that we guarantee that if you work at it, you will be guaranteed the ability to buy a home for yourself and your family, to own a piece of the American dream. And lastly, what if you could afford to teach school in the state of Oklahoma? The educators in this room, you know what? You have given the best years of your life to our kids, unlocking their potential, unlocking their lifelong love of learning. Once you get that fire started, there is no putting it out. There is no end to the possibilities that that kid now possesses. And look what we ask you to do. In your state and in mine, we ask you to take a second or a third job on for the privilege of teaching our kids. In my state, it still leads the nation in school shootings more than 3 years after Uvalde, where 19 kids and 2 wonderful teachers lost their lives because we put more priority on the interests of the NRA than on the lives of those who are making this country great to begin with, day in and day out. I want to make sure that if you teach school or you work in public education, that we have your back and we treat you with the respect and the dignity that you deserve. We can do this in America. We are the wealthiest, the most powerful country in the whole of human history. We do not lack resources to accomplish anything that I've just described and so much more. It is just the political will that we have failed at to this date. So, I mentioned treating people with dignity and respect. On this issue of human, You know, right now, the other side finds it politically convenient to attack people based on their differences, based on how they were born, based on the fact that they may not be as popular as other Americans. And so I ask you, when you see the next attack on a transgender American, you stand next to those transgender Americans and let them know that we have their backs. If you're gay, if you're bisexual, if you're a lesbian, you're every bit as American as anybody else in this country. And call me crazy, but if you're a woman, I believe you should make your own decisions about your own body, your own future, and your own health care. And we can do this. We can do this. 1973, abortion was just as illegal in the state of Texas as it is today. And no one, and you guys know how this feels, no one rode to our rescue in the state of Texas. It was, in fact, Texas women who rode to the rescue of the rest of the country. You've heard the name Jane Roe. You may not have heard of her attorneys, Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington from Abilene, Texas. Those three women called upon an all-male United States Supreme Court to render the Roe versus Wade decision that stood the test of time for 49 years. So my message to Donald Trump, to Greg Abbott, and to Governor Stitt is do not fuck with the women of Texas or Oklahoma. Not at all. Not at all. Or they will find out. But we are a global superpower. I mentioned the most powerful country on the planet today. And with that comes great responsibility. Thank you. With that comes great responsibility. And so these human rights that I'm talking about here at home, they must extend abroad as well. And I want you to imagine a future where America is no longer complicit in the bombing and starving and suffering of children in Gaza. And instead, we use that awesome power that we have to establish an independent, sovereign state for the Palestinian people and work for their safety and the safety of the Israelis and the safety of everyone in that region. It is within our power to be able to do this. We just have to choose it. It's no longer about starting wars or complicity in the wars that are being waged, but instead to sow peace and reap prosperity, not just for those who are living through war right now and dying from it, but for America as well. The amount of money that we spend arming, for example, the Israeli defense armies around the world is absolutely staggering. Believe them when they say we don't have the funds for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or food stamps. Don't believe them when they say we don't have the money for Medicaid. We have more than enough. We can spend it here at home. And then I would love if we brought that same logic back to this country. And we no longer accepted these plainclothes masked thugs abducting our fellow citizens out of Lowe's or Home Depot parking lots, out of schools, out of churches, out of federal courthouses. If you saw the video of the young graduate student in, I think it was Tufts in Massachusetts, who had the audacity to write an opinion piece for her student newspaper. And for doing that, someone captured this out of the second-story apartment window. She's walking down the street. This van pulls up. These clothes agents, we assume that's what they were, abduct her, carry her away. I've got a 17-year-old daughter. If I witnessed that scene, complete strangers jumping out of the van, no warrant, no due process, no charges, no warning whatsoever, what the fuck are they going to do with my girl? Are they going to take her away? Are they going to kill her? Are they going to kidnap her? Why are we allowing this to happen in our country? I think to fix this, we've got to imagine an America where we once again commit ourselves to that Constitution. together. A woman asked him when he comes out, what did you guys come up with in there? And it may be too loud.
Okay, you're good. It's on.
Yeah. Okay. What did you come up with in there? And you guys know the answer he gave. He said, "A republic, if you can keep it." Now here we are, more than 200 years later, about to lose this great safeguard for our republic and our democracy. And so I think when folks ask us as we leave this room, what are you guys working on? It is a republic, and we're going to fight for it to establish it right now, right? And it starts with the Constitution and making sure that its sanctity is preserved, that is never defiled or destroyed again by any person from any party in any level of power. But this issue that Trump is using to divide us and perhaps distract us and ultimately destroy the Constitution, if we allow him to, of immigration, which he used to such great effect in 2016, coming down the escalator, warning us about the rapists and the criminals, the not the very best that they're sending to this country, inspiring a shooter with his talk of invasion and animals and, terrorists and thugs coming across the border to come to my hometown of El Paso in 2019 and slaughter 23 people in a Walmart on the Saturday before the school year started in that year. A guy who posted online before that massacre, "I have come to repel the invasion I was warned about." Well, I'll tell you what, as bad as Trump is on this, and he is the worst, and he is totally at fault for what I've just described that is going on and that has happened in this country, there's another party involved. For as long as I can remember, I have heard Democrats talking about comprehensive immigration reform. I've heard Democrats advocating for immigrants. What I have not seen Democrats do is once they're actually in those positions of power and public trust, using that to help the very people that they campaigned on. In 2008, we won the White House, the House, and the Senate. There was no immigration reform. In fact, you saw the largest deportations in American history. In 2020, we won the White House, the House, and the Senate, and there was no immigration reform. We cannot blame our fellow Americans who have been hearing our party talk about this for decades so far, but not moving an inch when they have the opportunity to do so. So, when we win power, we will not talk about this. We will, as my friend in Wisconsin, Mandela Barnes, says, we will drive the car like we stole it. We're going to rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, reflecting our realities here in Oklahoma City, my hometown of El Paso, Texas, the United States of America. Like this: legalize every single dreamer for life, legalize every dreamer's parents for life. And let's take it a step further. I know Trump will love this one. Let's legalize every hard-working American doing the back-breaking work that makes this country great to begin with. We are grateful to them. Do not. There are too many in my party, present company excluded, who now see immigrants and transgender Americans and anyone else targeted by Donald Trump as a political liability. And for the sake of convenience, they're like, hey, Beto, let's not talk about that stuff anymore. That didn't win us the election in 2024. These folks, in other words, are expendable. But let me come back with this. I think almost all of us, regardless of party and regardless of where we live, can agree that we want to know who's coming into this country. We should have control of our borders. There should be a safe but legal and orderly path for people to arrive in America, to join family, or to work a job, or to flee persecution or certain death. But don't let anyone tell you that immigrants have taken anything from this country, because they have given far more to the success of America than they could ever take down at all. At all. So, this is what I think about when I'm trying to describe to myself and to my family and friends and the folks I live with in El Paso what it is I want to fight for. I know who I'm fighting against, but what are we fighting for? What does America look like once we win power again? We've got to be able to describe that to one another. And I'll close with this. We are all tempted from time to time, some more than others, to give in to despair. I face that as well. You know, the thought enters your mind, who am I against all of this, against the most powerful man on the planet, who is backed by the wealthiest man in the world, who controls the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate, state legislatures, the governor's mansion here. I mean, unrivaled power in the entirety of American history. That's a fair question. But remember who we are and what we're made of and where we come from. For these 249 years, beginning with this audacious idea that we're all created equal and that we should expect to be treated equally under the law of this country. No kings, no tyrants, just a government of, by, and for the people. For these 249 years, just remember what we have come up against and what we've overcome. The strongest empire on the planet, the British. We freed ourselves from them to secure our independence, to never again live under a king or nobility or lords, just us governing ourselves. It wasn't 90 years later that we defeated the armies of the Confederacy. We sacrificed 300,000 men from the Union, 17, 18, 19 years old, who died the most miserable, painful deaths that we can imagine, to secure the freedom for their fellow Americans and to ensure that one man cannot lord over or own another in this country. It wasn't but 80 years from then that brave young people from Oklahoma City and my hometown and all across America on the 6th of June, 1944, landed on those beaches of Normandy, again, willing to give their lives to fight and defeat fascism abroad and protect this democracy here at home. And then look at the generation that followed theirs. In the 1950s and the 1960s, our fellow Americans peacefully, nonviolently, democratically pursued the full civil and political rights for their fellow Americans. It didn't matter where you were born, didn't matter your gender, the color of your skin. Nothing of our differences was going to stand of the way of being treated equally under the law, of coming a little bit closer to fulfilling that foundational promise of America. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was signed on this day 60 years ago, August 6, 1965. LBJ, who had told Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Andrew Young in a meeting at the Oval Office at the end of 1964, he said, you know, gentlemen, I'm grateful that we could work together on civil rights. I understand that now you would like to vote, but I just don't have the power to get that done. And King and Young leave that meeting, and Young says, well, what do we do now? And King turns back to Young and he says, we go out there and we get this guy some power. And over the coming days and weeks and months, everyday Americans, and I mean it, it was all of us, no matter your age, no matter where you lived, we took to the State House steps, we wrote our members of Congress, we lit the switchboard at the White House on fire with the incoming calls to the president, and by the 7th of March, 1965, a 24-year-old John Lewis leads this march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge from Selma to Montgomery. And just like the pantheon of heroes that I named earlier, he was willing to give his life, and he nearly lost it in the process. to secure that promise that we made to one another and to the world back in 1776. It so moved the president. It was so galvanizing, so catalytic, that in 8 days, March 15th, 1965, he's convened a joint session of Congress. Every member of the House, every member of the Senate. And he places Lewis and those civil and voting rights marchers and protesters and advocates and heroes in the same lineage of those who secured our victories at Lexington and Concord, at that courthouse at Appomattox, on those beaches in France in 1944. Folks, all of that service, all of that struggle, all of that sacrifice has flown through all of these years to us today, right now, in this room. 249 years of it. Every generation prior to ours somehow found a way to overcome the greatest challenges that they faced, no matter the odds. So, no pressure, Oklahoma City, but this moment has come to us. And we cannot let the moment pass without a fight. So I ask you to do what you can with what you have, wherever you are, today and every day going forward until we win power. Are you with me? Are you with me on this? Are you with me? Are you with me on this? Let us go out. Let's win this power. And let's get America to where she should be. Thank you, Oklahoma City. Les agradezco. Thank you. We're going to do some questions? Thank you. All right. We want to get as many voices into the conversation as we can. Oh, someone asked for the text number again. If you want to help those Texas Democrats who are going up against Donald Trump, Ken Paxton, Greg Abbott, I mean, the mightiest forces in the country, text the word FIGHT to 20377. Chris at some point might give us an update on how much we've raised. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but in Omaha, Nebraska last night, we raised $7,000 at that meeting for those Texas Democrats. So let's see what we can do here in Oklahoma City. What's that? Okay, Doreen has the other microphone. Doreen, will you raise your hand? She's in the back wearing, and I'm sorry, Oklahoma folks, the burnt orange shirt of the University of Texas at Austin. She can't help it. She's from Texas. Doreen, raise your hand. If you will get her attention, she'll bring the microphone over to you. If you have a question, a comment, a suggestion, an idea, a solution to a problem that you have been working on, we are all ears. We want to hear it. So, Doreen, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, our first question is going to be over here.
I'm tired of the Republicans telling me what the Democrats stand for. We need to tell the world what we stand for and what we're going to do for the country.
Yes, I love that. We're going to build a democracy in this country because we have not had one for a while. We're going to make sure that folks can work, and when they work, that it's enough not to work a second or a third job. We're going to treat people with dignity and respect, and we're going to carry that over to what we do abroad and overseas, and we're going to make sure that a country that is comprised of immigrants, refugees from the world over gets its act together and welcomes those who make America great in the first place in a safe, legal, orderly way. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate you being here.
Okay, our next question is going to be over here.
Hi, I'm Tamara Stevenson, a proud Oklahoma State alum, and I just wrote an op-ed in Civil Eats that we need a food bill of rights. Seeing that we have cuts to SNAP, knowing that the U.S. did not sign the UN Declaration of Human Rights on the rights of food just 2 years ago, how are we going to make sure that we don't become Gaza in 2026, making sure that we are not hungry and we have food insecurity in this country and in this state?
I love this. You know, my guess is that most Democrats, Chris, I don't know if you noticed the microphone just kicked in. Yeah, all right. Better late than never. Most Democrats would agree with everything that you've said. But one of the points that I'm trying to make here tonight, and I hope you agree with me, is that we have not put enough pressure on those Democrats once they have held these positions of power. We're like, you know what? I trust Joe Biden. He's going to do the right thing. And Joe Biden did a lot of right things. He cut childhood poverty in half in this country. He confronted climate change unlike any president in American history. He invested in the infrastructure we've been missing, but he left a lot on the table. Where was voting rights? Where was Gaza? Where were these resources that our communities need right now? And no offense, and I wish him a successful retirement. I thank him for his service. But Merrick fucking Garland, where were you for 4 years when we had a absolute felon, corrupt criminal who had tried to overthrow the government of the United States of America? We have been far too concerned in this country, Democrats, about being right instead of being in power. Republicans just care about being in power and nothing else. We've got to get serious about power so that we can do everything that you just laid out right now. And that power, it begins right here in this congressional district. We win it, we have a chance to hold power in 2027. Thank you for being here. Ms. Sterini.
I believe the former governor wants to speak.
You know what? My bad. I neglected to introduce him, and I wanted him to do two things. I wanted him to talk about a former governor of Oklahoma who has just passed, but I also want him, as a governor himself, to talk about what he sees as the opportunity in this state and in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor David Walters was the 24th governor of the state of Oklahoma, an absolute hero and leader. He invested in higher education. He invested in public education. He had the backs of our educators. This guy is what public service looks like. Governor Walters.
I've never had to follow somebody that wore out 6 microphones. So this is a bit of a challenge. But I want to first, I do want to acknowledge a sad occasion in that we've had a week ago on this day the passing of George Nye. And a lot of you in here may not have known George personally, but I'm telling you, he knew you. Every time he met somebody, he asked where they went to school, where they were from. He asked about their family, and he spent all of his time trying to get things done. He would essentially gather everybody together, Democrats and Republicans, and he would make his case, and he would fight for changes, whether it was in mental health funding, whether it was in education, whether it was in roads and highways. George got tremendous amounts done, but most importantly, he wasn't about the headlines. He was about being a good Oklahoman and serving our state. And so when he lived to the rich old age of 98, I was completely certain that he was going to make it to 100, because he was co-chairing the Route 66 Commission for the 100th anniversary of Route 66. And so we were counting on it, because that's in 2 years. We were counting on it that Route 66 and George Nye were going to turn 100 at the same time. That didn't happen. But I tell you, he lived a wonderful last few days. And I was pleased to be a part of his bucket list. And one of his bucket lists was that he wanted to speak to the Democrats, the Carl Albert dinner. He grew up 2 blocks from Carl Albert. He delivered groceries to Carl Albert. And so the Carl Albert annual dinner, he asked me if I would take him to that. Well, the leadership of the Democratic Party created an entirely new award now called the Albert Nye Lifetime Service Award, and they surprised him at this event. And he had checked out of ICU with a bad case of pneumonia just 2 days. This was like June 26th. So very recently, he checked out of ICU on a Thursday, and we got him transportation to Tulsa, and he stood at his chair and gave a hell of a speech. And that speech was about coming together. And that speech was about getting things done. And that speech was that everybody mattered. And that speech was that we're all in this together as Oklahomans, and maybe a few Texans. And so I was talking to his family tonight about arrangements that they're making for the big memorial next Thursday. It's open to the public. It's going to be, you can Google it online. Please come if you're able to do so and express your honor and respect for a great, great leader that we lost. But I will say this, as we introduce these new leaders, what kind of hope is this? And what the great news is, I'm loving the fact that all of the ones introduced up here, at least, are all women. And when the tough gets going, turn to the women, and they're not going to lie to you. That's right. So, Beto, I just want to say a word about you, if you don't mind. I'm wearing this big old button. It cost me $5. I pulled into the parking lot out here, and the attendant, Matt Hecox, my friend, and I pulled into the parking lot, and he was automatically negotiating rates for free parking space, I think. And we settled on $20, and I told him, Matt said, well, this is former governor, we're trying to blah, 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 blah. And I don't like that, but that's what Matt said. And so when he heard the name Walters, he leaned in and took a really close look. And he asked me the question I get all the time, are you related? I begged my wife to let me endorse him in the Republican primary and pretend like he was my nephew because I thought that would do him damage, but she said no. But let me just tell you, as a public service announcement, I'm not related, and we're working on a billboard on Memorial that has my picture next to his and just the words, not related. That's it. I'll say this, lying in state on Monday was one of our greatest Democratic leaders, a wonderful man who devoted his entire life to public service. Never doing anything untoward, never being corrupt, never trying to hurt people. And in contrast, our news has been filled for the last several days with a Republican statewide elected official who sadly bears my last name, who does nothing but evil stuff. It's like a mini-me Trump. And so lining Trump's pockets by buying Trump Bibles to put in every classroom, but accusing teachers of having the audacity of indoctrinating our children when he then turns around and it's now a real deal here, Beto. They have set into our social studies curriculum election denialism. Teachers are forced to teach. Can you imagine that? And I have never had a TV automatically pop on with nude people on it. Never seen it. So, word about Beto. 2019, they call me and they say, Beto wants to come and tour the flood in Tulsa, and he's not that interested in press. He's running for president of the United States at that time. And he came, and I had the privilege of driving with him to Tulsa, and I took note of the fact, having been an elected official and hearing all those old jokes, you know you're not in office anymore when you jump in the back seat and the car doesn't go anywhere. Beto's driving. He's driving. He's eating snacks like crazy. He's driving, having a big time. The staff's in the back seat, and that's because he likes to drive. He goes up there and sits with and helps remove some of the damaged materials in these houses. And I watched him all afternoon. God, it was hot. walk up and down that neighborhood that had just flooded and listen to their stories. And no speeches, no publicity. He didn't want cameras to follow him. He wanted to listen to their stories. I hear a lot. I serve on the DNC. I shouldn't say that in a crowd that's sort of, we're being taught now by the media to think it's all the Democrats' fault. We hear all the time about messaging. Messaging is important. Messaging is critical. Why aren't we talking about public education? Why aren't we talking about infrastructure? Why aren't we talking about mental health? We talk about it constantly. It doesn't get covered. So what do we need? Do we need a good message, or do we need a messenger? I'm just telling you. I'm telling you. The message is the messenger. And we just heard one hell of a messenger tonight. Thank you. I don't like to stand by him because he's so damn much taller than I am. But listen, I'm not wearing this button by accident. I love me some Beto. So, thank you, my friend.
I love that. But before we take this next question, I have not been in elected office since 2019. I served for 6 years in Congress. I served in 6 years on the El Paso City Council. Before that, I've run some other races. And so for, an out-of-work politician who doesn't hold title or office, you think about what you can do with your life. Have I done enough? Can Amy and I go kind of take another path and focus on our kids and our life and enjoying each other? And, I think about that sometimes. It's kind of one of those temptations. I mentioned despair earlier. Another temptation is to kind of turn your back on all this stuff. Say, look, I did my part. I gave it my best. I went to every one of the 254 counties. It just did not work out. And I see this guy and what he has been doing since he held the highest office of public trust in the state of Oklahoma. And he could have just as easily said, look, I did my part. It just doesn't get any bigger or higher. I couldn't do any more. And for those of you who know his story, he did so at extraordinary personal cost, an incredibly difficult time for himself and his family. And yet this guy is still out there every single day for the people of Oklahoma, regardless of office or title. They're making him pay $20 to park his car here, and he still comes out. And he's really become a great friend and a guide to me, not on Oklahoma, but on public service and what it means to be so lucky to be born an American, to be born free, and to have the chance to help your fellow citizens. So let's hear it for our former governor, the only Walters that counts in Oklahoma for my money, Governor David Walters. Ándala pues. All right, Mr. Rini.
Okay, Beto, next question's going to be here.
All right, thank you. When the Democrats retake the House in 26, how do they stop these ICE raids? And also, how do they hold a guy like Tom Homan accountable for breaking the law?
Yeah. So a couple of ways, and I mean, to set everybody's expectations, winning control of the House, as important as it is not everything. It is not all the power that we need, and we need to continue to ruthlessly pursue that power in a Senate majority. We need to ruthlessly pursue that power by winning the presidency in 2028. But the question is, what do we do starting in January of 2027? The investigations and the hearings that Democrats will now be empowered to conduct will reveal, if they use that power, the names and the identities of those who have been swept up, who have been detained, who have been deported, in each case illegally and unconstitutionally. Furthermore, there will be a check on something that I should have brought up earlier. As bad as these sweeps are, I'll give you something even more chilling. That so-called big beautiful bill that added nearly $4 trillion to the debt, transferred, one-time transfer of just under $1 trillion from working Americans to the wealthiest 1% in this country. Something that, by the way, has been happening for decades in America. The wealth and income inequality has just been getting bigger and bigger and bigger under Democratic and Republican presidents. But beyond all that, there is $45 billion more for new ICE detention in the DHS budget. Now ask yourself this. If we have the lowest levels of undocumented, or if you call it illegal immigration in this country, and we do, it has never been lower, fewer people crossing into America through the Mexican border. If we have the greatest number of sweeps of undocumented and documented and legal immigrants alike taking place in this country, and they are being deported, and you have the greatest detention capacity already constructed in America that we have ever seen, what do you need with $45 billion of new construction capacity? I'll tell you what, you know, he came for the so-called gangbangers and the terrorists and the thugs, and God forbid you have a tattoo on your body because that's enough to indict you and send you to El Salvador. Then, and even before that, he signed an executive order ending birthright citizenship in this country, a fundamental tenet of the 14th Amendment ratified by this country in 1868, which says if you're born on American soil, you are a U.S. citizen. He has a Supreme Court, the best that money can buy, that will soon rule on this issue. It may be your child, should you have been born in another country, even though that kid was born here, who ends up in one of those cells. You heard him on a hot mic say, we're coming for the homegrown next. And then what if it is his political opponents? You know, these Democrats who are telling these immigrants what their rights are, who are asking too many questions, maybe he sees it within his purview and authority to detain and lock them up because they're a national security risk as well. He is betting that at every turn, you will fail to stand next to the person that he is targeting for persecution. You know the poem. First they came for the socialists, and because I was not a socialist, I didn't say a word. Then they came for the trade unions. I wasn't a member of one of those, so I didn't speak up. Lastly, they came for the Jews, and because I'm not Jewish, I didn't have anything to say. And by the time they came for me, there was no one left to say a word. That is our future unless these Democrats use that power. And it's not just investigative power. They will have subpoena power, meaning that they can compel even the President of the United States of America to turn over these records for these people who've been deported, to turn over these records for these girls and women who have been trafficked by his good friend Jeffrey Epstein, for the records of those who are enriching themselves at the public trough in this country under this corrupt administration. Bring that stuff to light. Not only can we begin criminal proceedings against those who should be indicted, but we give the American public a clear as day contrast between Democrats and Republicans. And as the gentleman just asked earlier, if we can match that with a compelling, ambitious, aspirational vision for America. These guys are dirtbags over here, and this is what we are going to do when we are in power. Then 2028 becomes the winnable election where we get this back, and then Democrats must use that power to its maximum hilt. But it begins by winning control and using it in 2027. Ms. Durini.
Okay, right behind you, Beto.
Okay.
Right over here.
I don't
Next
know where.
question.
Right. Okay.
There's a lot of talk about free and fair elections. I turned 46 last weekend. I've never in my life voted. I'm a felon. I made some stupid decisions when I was a teen, in my early 20s. And I have a felony hanging over my head. So in Oklahoma, it will be the 2030 midterms before I'm allowed to vote. So just food for thought. I don't know where your political journey is taking you. I don't know where you're going to be in 2028. I won't vote for you because my vote doesn't count.
Think about this, folks. Whatever you want to say about Russia or China or Iran or North Korea, this country puts more of its own citizens behind bars than any other on the face of the earth. In fact, Texas puts more people behind bars than any other state in the union. And disproportionately, these are people who have committed nonviolent crimes. In Texas, it may be the crime of possessing a substance that is legal in most of the rest of the country today. There are people serving time for possession of weed in Texas right now who have this hanging over their heads. And not only can they not vote when they're in jail awaiting trial, when they're in prison serving their sentence, when they get out, they have to be completely off paper or have that conviction expunged and then navigate the toughest voting laws in America, which is in our home state. And guess what? Understandably, these folk do not want to tangle with the government or with law enforcement again, and they just say, you know what? I'm good. I don't want to vote. In other states, that felony hangs over your head for the rest of your life or for 20 years. This is absolutely crazy. You cannot be defined by the worst mistake of your life. We are a country that believes in redemption and renewal and a second chance. You absolutely should be able to vote. And restoring voting rights for Americans who should be eligible, that has got to be something that we do when we build that democracy we're saving. Thank you for what you said today. All right, Ms. Dorini. There you are.
Okay, folks, we have time for 2 more questions.
She's
Hi.
saying I spoke too long. I'm sorry, but
That's
go
right.
ahead.
Too long, sir, too long. No, so we clearly don't have an issue with blue people or blue voters. How do we get them to the polls? Because that's what happened to Oklahoma this go around is we just didn't have well, among the few obvious things, but we didn't have the Democrats to show up. And so that we're kind of like, what can we do outside of doing a caravan or, dancing on the corner going, please come vote? Because that's what it feels like right now. Huh? Absentee? Right, but who else is? But how do we get other people to vote absentee? That's what...
Let me...
Right, and we do that. I mean, like I'm with Organizing Okies, and that's something that we're working on. But this has been an issue this whole time. So it's not that we don't have the Democratic voters. We just can't get them to show up.
Let me address this, because this is such an excellent question. When I ran for governor in 22 in Texas, it wasn't just Beto versus Abbott on the ballot. On the ballot was the most obscene abortion ban in America that had just been enacted. There was no exception for rape or incest or the life of the mother. And we were already losing women at a faster rate in Texas than almost anywhere else in the developed world. On the ballot was that shooting that I mentioned earlier in Uvalde. Not a single law had changed after Uvalde to make it any less likely that it happened anywhere else. You all remember the big freeze of February 2021? In the energy capital of the world, the state of Texas, the geniuses in charge could not keep the power flowing or the heat running or the water coming out of our pipes. 700 people died, froze to death in your border state of Texas. All that was on the ballot. 9 million registered voters did not cast a ballot in that election. Now, I contend that it is not because they're lazy. It's not because they don't love this democracy. It is not because they don't care about the issues that I just described. Our state has made a science of stopping people from voting whom they do not want to vote. At Texas A&M, no booze please, but at Texas A&M, one of the largest campuses, one of the largest student bodies in the country, for the first time ever in 2022, they removed the polling place from Texas A&M. They so feared what those students would vote for. Now, for those of you who've been to college, you know that either you or your classmates very often didn't have a car. Your life revolved around that campus. Voting is already kind of a tricky and hard enough thing in Texas. If you can't get to the polling place, what are you going to do? So here's what we're doing about it in Texas. You may be doing something like this already in Oklahoma City. We have a group called Powered by People. And our volunteers get trained as volunteer deputy registrars. So they get certified to register people to vote because there's no online voting registration in Texas. There's no automatic. There's no same day. If you are 18 and you want to register to vote, you have to figure out what a printer is. You have to fill out a form. You have to then find an envelope and then buy a stamp and then send that sucker into the county registrar in your county of residence and then wait 30 days for them to get back to you. And if they don't, you got to figure out why you didn't get registered. So we register these people on campus, but because we're the hardest state in the nation in which to vote, we don't leave them to their own devices. we stay in touch with them throughout the voting process on a personal level. So if I've registered Chris or Emily right here, the day I register Emily, I say, hey, Emily, this is Beto. So nice to meet you. Thank you for getting registered. 30 days later, Emily, did you get your voter registration card in the mail? No? Let me track that down for you. And I do. Right before the election, Emily, this is where your nearest polling location is. This is when early voting starts. This is the proof in the pudding. We were focused on 18 to 29-year-olds in Texas. Nationally, 18 to 29-year-olds voted at a rate of 42% in 2024. Texas always performs under the national average. In Texas, the 18 to 29-year-olds who went through our program turned out at a rate of 79%. So that's how we got them to vote in Texas. All right, Ms. Durini, I see you right at the back.
Okay, folks, I'm so sorry if I couldn't get to you, but this is going to be the last question of the evening.
All right, here we go.
I'm all for being an activist and protesting and things of that nature, but whenever I get detained or arrested, who's going to pay my bail? Who's going to protect me? Who's going to keep me from being disappeared?
It's a good question. Thank you for asking it. You know, I think we've got to level with one another that the fight that we're about to enter, I mean, it has not begun in earnest yet. And this detention capacity that I just described, it might very well be for you or for me or anyone who dares to speak up or march or protest. Part of the reason that I invoked the memory and the legend and the ghost of John Lewis is that guy took the blows in order to win the rights that we might very well lose right now if we don't fight back. But it will not be easy. You cannot do this online. It will not be done through social media. You can't even give enough money to absolve yourself of the responsibility of putting in the work. It means being out there in the sun, knocking on doors. It means protesting. And it means, to the gentleman's excellent point, risking arrest, risking violence, though I implore all of us to maintain the peaceful, nonviolent, democratic approach that has won so much political power in this country. The other side may not respect that, and we have to know that going into this. But if we are found wanting at this moment of truth, it is gone forever. I'm going to close with this because your question brought up this amazing comment that Abraham Lincoln made on a stage, perhaps not unlike this, in 1858. He was asked about the use and exercise of power in America. And he said, look, you've got the power of the president, you have the power of the legislatures, you have the power of the courts. But more powerful than all of that is the power of people. He said, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And here's what I think he meant by that. You know, John Lewis marching across that bridge, thank God the press was there. They broadcast those images across the country and around the world. And one person on that march did lose their lives. John Lewis, his skull was fractured, almost lost his life. We know the freedom riders who were imprisoned, brutalized, and beaten, the buses that were firebombed, the young girls in the South who lost their lives in church basements for Christ's sake, for trying to stand up for the promise of this country laid down 249 years ago. But their persistence in the face of those threats and those challenges and the risk of arrest, or yes, even of death, is what brought us through as a country to the victories that we were just celebrating earlier. I mean, I think we should count ourselves so lucky to be alive right now. I mean, how many generations of Americans have this chance to save our country at its moment of greatest need? I enumerated them earlier. Maybe there were 5. You know, we are the next. But it will not come without cost. And I hate to say that because I can only imagine what that means in the coming months. And so part of what I wanted to do today by joining you in Oklahoma City is not only to rally us to the fight, but to steel us with the resolve that is going to be necessary to see it through and to win. If we are willing to do this, I promise you we are going to prevail, and we must do it together, because If we do not hang together, we are going to swing alone in Trump's America. So let's be together every day going forward until we win this power for each and every single one of us in America. Thank you for coming out.